labor, stuff like that. But I've got a lot of props that I made myself, or at least modified, and it's something that is really, dear to me, and I really, I'm glad that I have something like that to display. Also, on my bedroom wall, I also have other, masks, things that I 3D printed myself and painted. Obviously, they're not my original design, um, but something that I quite enjoy making. At least I used to enjoy making. So the next topic is for day 20, which I should have done on the 20th, is just for you. I don't quite know what that means. So I'm going to make it like a little bit of a message to myself, or like, from me to me, if I were to ever see this again. If I think the first thing I would say to myself, or I would tell myself, would be to never stop making, because making is something that, I enjoy, you enjoy. Um, I think that other than keep making stuff, is just keep trying those difficult projects, those projects that seem to be impossible to do, or to finish or to start. Those are the projects that make it worthwhile. And the more you practice, the better you get at it. And it's something that at least I've experienced in leatherworking. Um, I used to do a lot of different making stuff, a lot of different projects, not just leatherworking or prop making. I used to do a little bit of woodworking, but I've never done a lot to actually see any significant progress. So leatherworking is like the first skill that I actually dove into, kept at it, and is really one of those things that I can actually see the progress from start to nowadays, from when I started to nowadays. So yeah, much like leatherworking, if you ever manage to get a forge and an anvil, blacksmithing might be a thing you might never want to give up again, or at least keep at it. So yeah, that's a message for myself: get a forge and an anvil and keep trying. So the next topic to discuss is the most interesting tool, and I've got too many tools to really just classify them as one better than the other, and I like all tools equally. But I think the most interesting one, just for the sheer ability to be versatile and do whatever you want with it, is the 3D printer. And the 3D printer is an excellent piece of technology, which basically lets you do whatever you want. In reality, it's a versatile piece of machinery. You can make molds with it, you can make sculptures with it, you can make parts to use in other pieces with it. Like, for example, like once I needed, for example, something practical, like a couple of like angle brackets to hold my subwoofer in place underneath my desk, and I just modeled them and 3D printed them. And it's something that's very easy to do. It's very easy to get into, and the bar, even for in terms of machine, in terms of cost, the bar isn't very high. You can get a 3D printer for a couple of €100, although I wouldn't recommend getting something like that, because you'll spend a lot more time trying to modify it. But it's a good start off point. And I know that a lot of people might not agree with me, but I think that technology doesn't necessarily mean better. High tech doesn't necessarily mean better, and most interesting doesn't necessarily mean the most antiquated or the most rustic or the thing that requires most skill to use. So I think the most interesting. Also, I have to mention some other tools which I may not have just yet, like, for example, foundries and forges. Although, I mean, technically a tool because you're using them to make something, but I mean, stretching it a little bit, aren't we? But I do appreciate their use, and I do think that they're quite interesting. And at the end of the day, I think the most interesting tool, and sorry if I sound a little bit stupid and corny for this, but it's the human brain, to be honest, because for us to use um, our wisdom and our experience to make something, like, for example, how to work leather, or how to 3D model something, or I don't know, properties of metal so that you can melt them or work them as you need. It's quite striking to me. And I think that's another thing that's really useful. And I think the most interesting thing about makers is our experience, our collective experience, and our just our making stuff. So the next topic to discuss would be shop organization, but I think I've covered that adequately well in one of my first videos when it was my workspace. So I'm just going to mention that I try as much as possible to keep everything handy. I try to obviously maximize on space. I have a very small workshop, So whenever I have to buy a new tool, I have to carefully organize where it goes, and obviously whether I need to build like extra shelving for it or stuff like that. So I try to maximize on the wall space that I have in the workshop. So yeah, enough about that. I actually did talk quite a bit about it, so I'll leave a link to the one of the first videos that I made. Okay, so advice. What kind of advice can I give? Advice is very specific. I don't think that you can give a generic advice about everything except get a dog. um, so I think the advice is very specific, I think, for the kind of project. So you can give advice on leatherworking in the sense that, you know, you can give tips about leatherworking or how to work it. You can give tips about woodworking or other stuff. But generic advice, I think, to keep in mind generic advice to keep in mind is perhaps keep on making and keep trying out stuff. I think one of the things that I keep telling myself recently, and what I keep telling other makers recently, I find um, is practice makes perfect, and that is actually very true, as I've been saying. So you know, when something goes wrong, it's just an opportunity to learn from it and try again. Unless it goes so wrong that, you know, you need to rethink a little bit of a couple of life choices, like, you know, don't hold don't store flammable things next to an open fire or something. Yeah, as always. Work in progress. Work in progress. Oh, this is a good one, I think. Currently, I'm obviously not working on anything. I'm not in the workshop. But the last project that I started, and it's still in my workshop at home, is a costril. A costril is a leather flask. I made the leather flask before, and I have it on my blog in on my website, corsoworkshop.com. But this particular costril is different. I mentioned it, and I think I did show it in a past video on what's on my workbench. And basically, it is my original design. I wanted to give it a little bit of an elven motif, like a little bit of a fantasy feel theme to it. And I think for the most part I succeeded. I just need to finish sealing it properly, which is proving to be a little bit difficult. But I do have a video on it, as in I'm making a video on it. So I hope to give a little bit more detail on that, on how I made it and how I sealed it, hopefully properly, because I really would like this thing to work. It's a gift for one of my friends and for LARPing, and I would really like for this to work properly. So currently what I'm working on is the leather costume. Other than that, there's generic projects like, you know, neckerchief woggles for scouts, that sort of thing. Something small which I can do when I'm not at the workshop. So one of the last two topics that we need to discuss is lessons learned. And I think the most significant lesson that I've learned in my workshop is to respect power tools. I know that it's obvious and a lot of makers say it, to respect power tools, but um, it's never as real unless, you know, you get your first kickback on the table saw, or you get the first, you know, wooden piece flying off the chop saw and, you know, missing you by inches. And that is why it's important to wear, you know, personal protective equipment, PPEs, glasses, goggles, gloves, whatever you need, and to, you know, properly use these kinds of tools. Power tools need to be, you know, treated with respect. There have been, I've said it in the past, and there have been other makers a lot by decades more experience than I have, who've had their little fingers chopped off because of a moment's distraction. So it's very important to respect power tools, respect the you know, the danger that they pose, but also to respect the fact that they are very useful tools to have in the workshop, and that without them, basically, you know, making would be a lot more difficult and a lot more tedious. So just because something is dangerous doesn't necessarily have to be bad. It just needs to be treated with the proper respect and caution. So keep that in mind. Yeah, something that I've learned in the workshop, lessons learned, respect power tools.
Yes, sir.
So we've reached the end of our walk. Actually, we need to start heading back because it's soon getting dark. We need to prepare food for survival. Hey, hey, 1, 2, come on, let's do the video together. The last topic to discuss is my most desired tool. And I think if you followed any of these projects, or
Know him at all.
yeah, or if you know me at all, you know that what I'm going to say. I would love to have a forge and anvil. I would love to get into blacksmithing. Um, I think there's just something about blacksmithing. I mean, I keep on repeating myself in these kinds of videos. I just really admire the craft. So yeah, if I ever get the opportunity, if there's ever one tool that I ever, if you tell me that I can get only one tool, in my life, like one set of tools. Okay, let's say one set of tools in my life, and that's going to be a forge, anvil, and what comes with them, like dongs, hammers, and that sort of thing. For blacksmithing, I want to start blacksmithing if that's not clear enough. So yeah, that's it basically. That's blacksmithing stuff. That's what I want. It's what I desire most in my workshop. So thank you very much for joining me for this collection of episodes of Made for Makers. It's honestly fun to do these kinds of things, but it's a little bit difficult to do them when there's so much stuff going on, despite not a lot going on because of COVID. But that's life. Right, Sam. Shall we start heading home? Yes. Thank you very much for joining me for these episodes of Made for Makers. I will hopefully see you in the next episodes, the last few days of May. So yeah, we're almost to the end. I hope that at the very least this little bit of a series of videos has been a little bit of an insight into what I do, what I make, how I make, and what my thought process is, and hopefully it gives you a little bit more of a little bit of inspiration to start making stuff for your own. As always, I will try to keep uploading projects. I think the last one that I uploaded was the tool roll, so there's a link there. Yeah, thank you very much, and I'll see you next time. As always, stay safe and keep making.